Good afternoon. Good. Thank you for coming to our third lecture this spring in the Diversity Lecture Series. I'm George Fair, the Interim Vice President for Diversity and Community Engagement. I'm very happy to have you all here today and happy to welcome you to our Diversity Lecture Series. This will be the last lecture that we have in our spring session. We have another member of the Interdisciplinary Studies faculty, Dr. Lynn Winstead Mabe. The lecture is entitled Diversity and Interpersonal Communication. Interpersonal communication is the foundation for all human interactions in all levels and types of relationships. This lecture will provide insight for us on this significant topic. There are important points regarding our interactions with others that we should be aware of, especially in the diverse community that we live today. Culture, religion, individual fields of experience, gender, and many other physical, social, and societal factors also play a role in our interactions with others, our perceptions of others, and how we relate with the diverse world. Dr. Lynn Winstead Mabe is a senior lecturer at UT Dallas in the School of Interdisciplinary Studies, where she teaches the following courses. And listen to these courses. There are lots of them related to communication, and I think it gives us a sense of her experience and background in that area. Interpersonal communication, crisis communication, intercultural communication, communication in America, the culture of bullying in America, and professional communication. She began teaching at UT Dallas in 2006. She is also a consultant for several different law enforcement agencies and departments where she works on departmental and agency issues regarding interpersonal communication, crisis communication, critical stress debriefing, and crisis management. She was a licensed professional counselor in private practice, working with law enforcement officials, officers, and their families in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for over 20 years. She specializes in dealing with specific and unique issues that can be a product of a career in law enforcement and the communication issues that arise in both personal and professional lives of police officers. It is my pleasure, and I am very proud to invite you to participate in this lecture from Dr. Mabe, who has extensive experience and expertise in diversity and intercultural communication. Dr. Mabe.
Thank you. Okay, am I working? I'm working. Okay. Thank you so much for coming here today. When I agreed to do this, I envisioned being somewhere very casual and a bunch of students eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches on their lunch break. But I am happy to be here today. I am born and raised in Dallas and went to high school right here at J.J. Pierce. So I'm going to address some of my diversity background as we move forward through this. But this is the city of Dallas because I think I love the city of Dallas, but I believe Dallas to be a truly diverse city. When I came here to UTD, that was one of the first things that I truly enjoyed about being here on this campus is the diversity of the students in this campus. So this is just a passion of mine. When I first came here, I want to thank Dean Fair because I think he took a gamble on me starting back in 2006. I was recommended to him by a colleague here at UTD and went in and interviewed, and I'd heard a lot of nice things about Dean Fair. But I went in with my resume and was sitting in the conference room waiting for Dean Fair to walk in. And I had heard, again, just a lot of nice things, very professional, stately gentleman, a lot of very professional things about Dean Fair. And my vision of Dean Fair, again, I would tell my students now, if you're going in for a job interview, Google the person that you're going to meet with. But my vision of the dean that I would meet with was about a 5'10", older, gray-headed little Caucasian man. And so I was waiting for the dean to come in, and in walks I don't know how tall Dean Fair is, 6'2", 6'3", African-American man. And I thought, oh, okay, so here we are. This is my first, I've got my stereotype of, I think, Albert Einstein vision when I think of college dean. And so that was sort of my first experience with Dean Fair. So I just thought I would share that today. I've never shared that with him, but as far as I mentioned, I went to J.J. Pierce High School. We had 2 African American students in my high school at that time. They were brother and sister. And I did not have. I went to a private school from preschool through 8th grade. The same children every day from preschool through 8th grade. Not a lot of diversity at the private school where I went to school here in Dallas. And then went to J.J. Pierce. So then I went on to Stephen F. Austin. Again, I don't know that was a hotbed of diversity in Nacogdoches, Texas. My first job was in private practice counseling. I got a major in psychology. I want to acknowledge also Dr. Bob Nelson, who taught my senior in high school psychology class and got me into my entire career and line of work because he was so inspirational to me. I went to Stephen F. Austin. I majored in psychology and criminal justice, and with a minor, some more stuff in counseling, went on to get a master's degree in counseling. When I was getting out of my master's program, I had a professor that said to me, I've got a woman that you need to meet in Dallas. She's president of the Texas Counseling Association. She's a fantastic woman, and you need to go and meet with her. As I'm going to Dallas, I'm trying to find a counseling job and that situation. So I went and met with this woman. She's been in private practice. Her name is Molly Bohannon. She was in private practice for many years and sort of took me under her wing. We had a great first meeting. I really enjoyed her, hit it off, great communication. And so we had sort of agreed she was going to be my mentor, my supervisor to get my counseling license. And as I was leaving that day, she said, "How are you with gay people?" I said, "Oh, I love gay people. Yeah, they're good. They're fine." I didn't think about the question really. I liked to think of myself as I like all people. But that was her way of seeing, we were in the heart of Dallas at Cedar Springs. She had a clientele that she wanted to make sure I was going to be okay to be with, especially in a counseling situation. So pretty quickly, she referred a lesbian couple to me to see in private practice. Again, I was an intern. I was probably 22. And so she referred this couple to me, and so I went to her and said, I'm seeing my first gay couple. What do I do? What do I say? What am I supposed how am I supposed to go about this? And she said, they're going to say the same things that any other couple says. Somebody doesn't take out the trash. Somebody's mad about money. It's going to be, and so sure enough, I was like, okay, 5-10 minutes into it, I was like, okay, I can do this. This is all the same stuff that everybody else is sort of talking about. So I don't come to you today from this major diverse background. In private practice, I feel like I walked with people through a transition for them as to how to align themselves with who they are and how to get through. And I'm going to use the word oppression. That's a big word. But however they felt that they were being persecuted by family, by work, by community. I have sat with people while they wrote letters, coming out letters to their family. I have sat with families who have a transgender child as they try to accept and understand This person that I always thought was my son is now going to become my daughter. How do I make that transition? So there's a lot of things that I think, for me personally, seeing people's pain firsthand that has led me to sort of where I am today. And then as far as the communication piece, and I sort of have this on a slide in a second, but I truly believe that communication is what bridges us all together. Interpersonal communication is truly the only way we begin relationships, the only way we get to know other people, the only way we signal to people, I like you, I want to be your friend, I accept you. All of that happens through interpersonal communication. So, again, our talk last week, Dr. Song's talk was very culturally based. I don't come from as an expert on every, cultural nuance, but I do come from a heavy communication background because I think it can bridge so many things, so many ills, I suppose. I hate to sound idealistic, but I do think if we just do the basics of get to know one another, ask some questions, interact, make a friend that maybe doesn't look just like me, doesn't practice just like me. If I broaden my horizons, there's so much potential for my own growth, as well as growth, maybe even on a bigger, more global scale. So let's just get right into it. Today, again, what I won't do is be your cultural expert on every culture, religion, group that there is. But what I want to do is to open your heart and open your brain and relate that to interpersonal communication and diversity, and how these things can go together, and how we might all be better off if we are opening our heart and opening our mind. And again, I think that begins with communication. On campus, I teach interpersonal communication. I honestly love all of my classes, but interpersonal communication is probably my favorite class, because it's the class that students will email me 4 years later and say, hey, I kept my textbook and I just had a fight with my wife. Yeah, I got married, and I got that book out and went through the conflict chapter. And so for me, it's something that transcends all relationships. I tell my students, I want you to take these things with you to work, in your relationships, in your friendships, in your family. It's something that, regardless of what your major is, regardless of what you're going to do in your life, interpersonal communication is something that I want you to pack in your suitcase when you leave UTD and take with you, because I think it will benefit you in all areas of your life. That's my hope, at least. But interpersonal communication, we cannot not communicate. I understand that is a double negative. However, we are constantly communicating with people whether we want to or not. So if I have my earphones in my ears, which is what I do when I go to the gym, it is a signal, I do not want to talk to you. Okay? It is impossible to walk around in our world and not communicate with people. We are consistently sending signals, how we dress, how we move, how we carry ourselves. I may never say a spoken word to someone, but I have sent signals whether I meant to or not to people. So they could be misinterpreted, obviously, very easily, but I'm consistently communicating with people, whether I'm intending to or not. Communication is irreversible. It is impossible for us to get back something once it's been said, once it's been emailed. Raise your hand if you've said something before, or you've emailed something before that maybe you wish you hadn't. I think we're at 100%. So interpersonal communication is irreversible. So if there's some way for me to convince you today that interpersonal communication is really important, when you see that it's impossible not to communicate and that it is irreversible, those two things just right there might convince you that it's an important thing to pay attention to. I think ethically, interpersonal communication is, the ethical piece of that is more important today, probably more than ever, with social media and all of the different portals where people are pumping out information, true or untrue, biased or unbiased. I think that ethical communication is something we need to be thinking about as far as our interpersonal communications. It develops and sustains relationships. Again, we do not get to know each other if we do not communicate. I might be in a class with someone and sit next to them all semester long, but if I never turn to say, what is your name? What is your major? How long have you been at UTD? What job do you want when you leave UTD? Then I never get to know that person. Again, it's not even just proximity that we get to know people, but it is through interpersonal communication that we, and then once we meet someone or once we engage in conversation and we get to know people, it sustains relationships. You guys know once interpersonal communication shuts down, we're not going to get any further in our friendship, in our relationship, in our team meeting, in our joint project. We're not going to get any further if we aren't sustaining our relationships with interpersonal communication. In my class in interpersonal communication, we say interpersonal communication is not a panacea, which is a fancy word for it doesn't fix everything. Just because we can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk does not mean that we're going to solve all of our problems. It's an important skill, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it can fix everything. It can be learned. So I want my students to be able to come in and put some of these skills that we're talking about into practice and, again, open up their heart, open up their mind, and kind of get to know other people besides maybe just the people in their own little bubble, in their own little world. To me, interpersonal communication is the root of all evil or the seed for all beautiful things. So again, that probably sounds a little Pollyanna, but and I don't really feel like I'm very Pollyanna. I like to think I'm realistic, but I do think that it can take something and make it much better, or if not handled well, it can take things and make them much worse. So I just wanted to get us all on the same page here. Interpersonal is of or pertaining to the relationship between persons, existing or occurring between persons. Communication, the imparting or interchange of thoughts, opinions, or information by speech, writing, or signs, something imparted, interchanged, or transmitted, or a document or message imparting news, views, or information. And then diversity, the state or quality of being different or varied, or a point of difference. And when I was thinking about all of this, I thought, well, okay, diversity, the state or quality of being different or varied. According to what? According to who? Where's the marker for diversity, and now we're going to say it's different? Well, where did we start? Well, I don't know. It depends on your experiences in your life and what the marker might be. Okay, so that's an ever-flowing word to me, diversity. So this is something that I don't want to be confusing, but these are models of interpersonal communication. And I put them in here because I think that they are very important as far as conceptualizing diversity in interpersonal communication. Okay? So you see here, these are very similar but different, basically the same. You have the older models of interpersonal communication were very linear. It was a sender of a message, a receiver of a message, And that's kind of all we had. And then now maybe this person who was the receiver turned into the sender and sent a message, and this person became the receiver. And it was kind of this back and forth, but very linear process. In the newer models, the transactional model of interpersonal communication, you'll see here there is simultaneous sender and receiver. Because truly, if you think about communicating with someone, you don't sit there with a blank look on your face and just stare and say, and then when they're done talking, you say something. You're nodding, you're agreeing, you're saying, oh, you're doing verbals and nonverbals. You've got all these other things going on. So if I'm talking to someone, they are sending me signals as I'm talking. They're sending me signals of, I'm bored, I don't care, this is stupid, or it's interesting, tell me more. They are sending me messages, sometimes not even verbally. They're sending me messages all the time. So basically, the models show we're sort of always sender and receiver in communication. Then we have feedback, which is why we are always sender and receiver. We're going back and forth. We've got feedback going back and forth. We're sending messages back and forth. And then sometimes there is noise in the system of communication. So just like in here, I am speaking, you guys are listening, but somebody might have a phone go off, or an air conditioner might kick on, or there might be something. I know I have a class in a building where when the air conditioner kicks on, I have to get a little louder during that time. So there is noise sometimes in the system, and I'm going to talk about noise in just a second because to me it's very relevant to diversity. But we also have a context. You'll see this big circle up here in the top model. There's a context of communication. So communication takes place in a system or in a context. It occurs in a classroom. It occurs on a college campus. It occurs in a family. It occurs in the workplace. Okay, so communication varies depending on the context in which it is taking place. You would communicate very differently in your home with your family than possibly you would in a work environment. Then the other part, the reason why I put this other model in here, even though they're very similar, is because you'll see here it says fields of experience, okay? And the fields of experience are something that I want you to really think about as far as diversity goes. And I was going to make Eric come down here and demonstrate, but I already feel like I'm going to be short on time, so I'm not going to do it, but I'll demonstrate by myself if I can. Fields of experience are your field of experience, your religion, your culture, how you grew up. It is all of the things that make up you, okay? So you'll see here we have, and this is just, imagine this is just a two-person communication situation. If we had 4 people, we would have a whole lot more circles up here in this field of experience, okay? So you'll see here, there's the field of experience of the first person, field of experience of the other person, and then we have some overlap. And so what I was going to make Eric come down here and do, I'm writing Eric a letter of recommendation, so I thought he would volunteer to do anything that I asked him to do today, is if Eric were to come down here and I were to say, okay, I am... everything that I say that is different from you, I want you to take a step back. So if I were to say, well, I'm female, he would take a step back. And if I were to say, I'm a teacher, I'm a professor, he would take a step back. And if I were to say, I'm from Dallas, would you take a step back? You would take a step back? Okay. So you can just imagine in that transaction, if I were to say, I'm a mom, he would take a step back. If I were to say I'm a wife, he would take a step back. So we would also have some things in common. There are times that he wouldn't, if I said I am an integral part of the UTD campus, we would both stay here, right? Because we're both here at UTD. I work we are both in Richardson, Texas. Yes, we've got some things that are. I am a child of parents. He is a child of parents. So he may have siblings. I have siblings. So we've got things that are similar to us. So that's what this overlap is. But imagine again if Eric and I were doing this, and I ended up here, and he ended up out in the hallway, And now I'm going to try to have a conversation with Eric. So Eric, on the syllabus, here's what we're going to do. And Eric's like, hold on, I'm in the hallway. You end up with, there's a lot of things that come between people because they have very different fields of experience. So when we're talking about diversity and how we communicate or don't communicate and how we mess up, my students hear me say that a lot. How do we mess up communication? Because that's kind of why we're here. How do we misinterpret communication? Well, the smaller that little bubble of overlap is, the more potential we have to misinterpret each other. I may not look at Eric in the eye when I'm talking to him. He may interpret that to mean I'm rude or I don't care about what he's saying. I may come from a culture that eye contact is rude. I may stand too close to Eric in talking to him because in my culture, we stand a little closer to people. So he may, and if he doesn't come from that culture, he may think, that is weird, that lady is standing too close to me. So we have all of these potential things. The less and less we have in common, we have more and more potential to misinterpret each other. So, to me, that's one of the things that I just wanted to kind of illustrate to you guys is that the field of experience, the more different you think you might be from someone, and again, we don't know until we get to know them. We make assumptions about people based on a lot of things, and many of them can be wrong. But the more overlap we have, we can assume it might be easier, but that's not always true. And the less overlap we have, we might think that it could be a little bit more difficult to try to communicate. Were you going to say something, Eric? Now that I've picked on you? That's right. That's exactly right. So, again, I was telling Dean Fair that this diversity piece is really a passion for me because I feel like we tend to get very focused on our own fields of experience and discount somehow other people's fields of experience. And it doesn't promote good communication. It doesn't promote relationships or understanding. And it certainly comes to be in communication. So noise, I mentioned, there are types of noise that can mess up communication. Physiological noise is if I were to have a headache and someone was trying to talk to me, possibly I wouldn't be able to focus very much. Physical noise is, again, if the air conditioner came on and some of you had a hard time hearing me. Psychological noise and semantic noise. Those are the two that, to me, have more of a bearing on diversity in communication. Because psychological noise could be stereotyping someone. You think you know what they're going to say. You think you know how they're going to react. Prejudgment is a type of psychological noise. And so that interferes. It's almost like we can't really hear someone because of our own psychological noise. And by psychological noise, I could mean, Dr. Bob Nelson, voices and really a break from reality. That's not really what I'm talking about here. I'm really talking about our own prejudgments, our own stereotypes, and things that we come into, packed in our little bag, into a communication situation with someone that might be different than we are. Okay? And then semantic noise is basically if someone has an accent, if someone uses different words than how you might use them. It's truly not understanding things because of maybe a language barrier or an accent or just different use of words. And then I wanted to talk about perception because all of our communications begin with perception. Okay? And again, my perception is now related back to my field of experience. So I select things to pay attention to, and I draw conclusions from my interactions, again, and from my field of experience. But my perception is only half the story. One of the things we talk about in interpersonal communication a lot is our perceptions are partial and they're subjective. So not only do I not have the whole story, it's partial. Then I put my spin on just the part I have. Okay? So right there in the communication system, again, then you get into the field of experience. I'm trying to communicate with someone that's very different, maybe just a little different than I am. We have different views. Okay? So we get further and further away sometimes in our perceptions. Therefore, our communication interaction with someone, when it's possibly not even based in reality. So the influences on perception, physiology, age, culture, roles. My perception of things are very different than my teenage daughter. What she thinks at 17 years old is, make or break. At 47, I think, it'll pass, it'll be okay. So sometimes age, experience, again, life experiences, your field of experience, alter your perceptions and how we're dealing with things. And then I wanted to read this just because I was thinking about this this morning. Oh, I'll need my glasses. Hold on. We've heard if you're on a college campus, you've heard the word ethnocentrism, I hope. And but I wanted I just printed this really quickly this morning. The belief in the inherent superiority of one's own ethnic group or culture. Okay, this is from dictionary.com. A tendency to view alien groups. Alien groups or cultures from the perspective of one's own. Belief in the intrinsic superiority of the nation, culture, or group to which one belongs, often accompanied by feelings of dislike for other groups. The tendency to evaluate other groups according to the values and standards of one's own ethnic group, especially with the conviction that one's own ethnic group is superior to the other groups. So when we talk about psychological noise, to me, it's ethnocentrism. It's thinking that if you don't talk like me, if you don't look like me, you don't dress like me, you don't pray like me, you don't date like me, that it's messed up and it's wrong. Now, most people, if I were to stick a microphone in your face and say, hey, do you think that you know everything and that you're the greatest and you're a group superior? Well, not exactly. Okay. Probably intellectually, you may not believe that your group in every regard, culture, religion, geographic location, campus, whatever, is absolutely the best. But I think we walk around in our own field of experience and underneath it assume that we're right, assume that our way is the right way. So it's very difficult to get to know someone and to interact with them if we aren't interpersonally communicating with someone that might be different than us. And we talk a lot in some of the classes that I teach. We talk a lot about communication and seeing things from other people's point of view. We talk about dual perspective. Dual perspective is trying to see things from someone else's point of view. And, I like to think that my students leave my class less ethnocentric. It might last 20 minutes. I like to think it would last 20 years, 200 years, I don't know. But all of these things go back to our perceptions of other people and how we relate to other people. And we talked a lot in some of my classes about, and Becky's in one of those and has suffered through several of my classes. But we talk about being politically correct. And I certainly think that our culture needed some political correctness. But I think that trying to be so politically correct has left us in the dark sum of having some difficult conversations, of broadening our minds, broadening our hearts. I find it is so interesting to me when I have a student of a different culture or ethnicity, and again, this is just my this is just my assumption on how they look or dress or what they might wear, to be able to say, tell me about you, tell me about your culture, tell me about your family, because then I get to learn. Now, some people might think, well, that seems rude. Maybe I should pretend like I already know, right? Like I'm a teacher, I'm a professor here at UT Dallas, like I should already know everything, right? Well, no. Some of the best advice I ever got in my lifetime was from a professor of mine. I went into my doctoral oral exams. This is embarrassing that I'm going to tell this right in front of my dean. I went into my doctoral oral exams, and I had been saying in my own head over and over, which someone had said to me, they can ask you anything about anything. They can ask you anything about anything. I mean, like back to your master's degree, I mean, way, way back, they can ask you anything about anything. So I had freaked myself out so badly that by the time I got to my oral exams, with a table full of professors firing questions at me, when they said, what's your name? I was like, I think it starts with the L. I was so worked up that I didn't even know my name. And so my major professor pulled me aside and said, what is going on? I don't recognize this person. And I said, I just have freaked myself out so bad because I think I'm supposed to know everything. And she said, who told you that? You don't have to know everything. Don't go through your life pretending like you know things or trying to figure out a way to make it look like you know something that you don't know. What a horrible way to go through life. And man, I latched onto that. And because I think it is so freeing to be able to say, I don't know about your culture, but I want to learn. I want to know more. I am interested in you. I am interested in your background because it broadens my horizons and it broadens my scope. It broadens my field of experience. I may never go to that geographic location, but I can learn about it from someone that has lived there, from someone that was born there, from someone that speaks that language. So I think we have to just be able to broaden our horizons a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to just skip on to here. And this is kind of, I think I'm sort of running out of time, which I knew that I would, but the verbal communication and the nonverbal communication are things that I don't know that we think about. Verbal communication is supposed to be the easy part, except you'll see here words are arbitrary, ambiguous, and abstract. So they're arbitrary. No one came down and decided that a paper is a paper and that everyone thinks a paper is a paper, right? P-A-P-E-R. So words are arbitrary. They're very ambiguous. They mean different things to different people. When I say the word love, different people have different meanings for that. And they're very abstract. We can talk about abstract terms in our language, in our verbal communication. But again, because of the arbitrary and abstract and ambiguous nature of interpersonal communication, you can see again how we can mess up communication. Because when I say I love you, you think that teacher said she loved me. And I may just mean I loved your project that you did, or I love that you're always here in my class and you sit up front and you don't fall asleep. Who knows what I might really mean by that? But there's all of this arbitrary nature to our verbals. And then nonverbals. Nonverbals, just so you know, are considered to be more believable than our verbals. We tend to monitor our verbals much more than our nonverbals. So if my husband says to me, do you want to go here for dinner? And I go, okay. Well, okay, what you gonna believe? I said okay, or I said I'm fine, or whatever, but I rolled my eyes and I turned away. I was just teaching at a seminar recently, and I approached, and it was on communication, obviously, and I approached someone and I said, so tell me, what do you think about this situation? And this man went, well, and I thought, well, you don't even have to answer my question now because I've already gotten the message. So our verbals are something that people tend to believe are nonverbals more than our verbals. Our verbals can be very scripted, can be very planned, and I would never say that to a student, but maybe my nonverbals gave me away that, I didn't think they were working very hard in my class. So when they come up and say something to me and I go, well, oops, I didn't mean to really do that whole thing. So the nonverbals are something that we, I think, really use more than any other thing to indicate to people, I'm open to communication, I'm open to a different way, I've got an open mind, I've got an open heart, or I don't. We tend to monitor our verbals more than our nonverbals. So it's something just for us to pay attention to. And then I guess I'll end on this because I think we're sort of getting to our time. But improving interpersonal communication. Again, this was a very short little talk today. I teach this class on campus, and we have the whole entire semester to break down all of these, very important topics. Again, they're important to me. They may not be important to you, but we want to try to think about our communication, think about our listening and our verbals and our nonverbals. How approachable are we to people that might be different from us? How much of a signal am I sending to people that I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to engage? Or how much of a message am I sending that I am not willing to engage? I'm not willing to think differently. I'm not willing to entertain the thought of a different way. So we want to think about just trying to develop more of an open heart and an open mind. That is an active process. It's not something that's going to come and land on you while you're watching TV in your living room. It's something that you have to go out and pursue somewhat. And take your earphones out of your ears when you think that that's appropriate and you're open to that, and engage with people. Engaging in dual perspective, trying to think about, you may not ever agree with someone else, but you might just consider, what must it like to be them? What must it like to walk around in that situation or with that issue? Or in our country when you're from someplace else. All of these things you want to be thinking about other people, and just sort of put ourselves in their shoes if we can. Monitor our communications and be thinking about, again, because a lot of times the signals that we're sending, we don't even necessarily intend to send. And monitor our labels and prejudgments, because that is that psychological noise that gets in the way of interacting with people that might be different from us. So that is my 45-minute little quick talk. So, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. And we do have time for questions. And if we have a question, I'll get the microphone up to you. There's one.
Hi. How early on in childhood can you start implementing some of these interpersonal communications? My daughter's about to be 6, so she's in that first grade, about to go into, and she's mixed, 3 different races. And so she's starting to already feel the ethnocentrism from other students in the class. And I'm having a very difficult time, and I'm trying to just kind of lead by example because I'm very open. But is there anything that, like read or kind of guide or?
I guess my big thing that I tend to preach is honesty and openness and reality. Because the reality of it is that people persecute other people and judge other people for a lot of really stupid reasons. And that is a fact of life. And so to be able to be very honest about, some people won't like you because you have blonde hair. Some people won't like you because you're 5'1", or whatever the situation might be. But I would encourage open discussion. And I would encourage her to be able, I would give her some kind of script, even if it's one sentence, to come back when someone says, "What are you?" Or, I've heard of kids getting asked things like that. And so let her come up with something that is her own, that she, let her write it out. And again, it's something that, I hate to say to be memorized because it's one little sentence or something very easy at her level. But she needs to have something in her back pocket that she's able to bring up. And then, I always tell people, so much of what we get from other people is so about them. So build a little bit of a barrier, and when someone rejects you, and we've all been rejected for various different things in life, let that just kind of bounce off as best you can. I'm not trying to be idealistic necessarily, because things hurt sometimes, but don't necessarily take it on as yours, because it's not. This is about other people and their ignorance and their unwillingness to listen or learn, and so that's not really about me, So just for her to be able to write something would be great. Just come up with her own little thing to be able to pop out.
We have another question?
So, in an office situation, for example, I was thinking the power differential between a boss and an employee might add to the noise. And I was wondering how a manager or a boss of some kind applies these lessons to improving interpersonal relationships with his or her staff.
It's interesting. I showed the model of interpersonal communication, and you're talking about a context. That's a different sort of context. So in that context, there's a lot of different things. But in my other class, we talk about rankism. And in the bullying in America class, and in that situation, sometimes it's better to let go of the rank as best you can. There's a boundary between boss and employee, but if I can try to talk to you with an open mind and set the tone. One of the slides I didn't get to, I guess I could flip to that really quickly, is climate. Okay, it was next. The climate is the tone we set for people in our interpersonal world. And so I have certainly had bosses that set the tone of, I'm the boss, I don't have time for you, don't come to me with your piddly stuff, very unapproachable, not very safe, not maybe a mentor. So to me, it's about setting a climate of, I am approachable. There's boundaries. I'm the boss. But to be able to set a climate and a tone overall of acceptance, and while not being peers and buddy necessarily, and tell me about your divorce and all that stuff that we don't do in the work environment, but being able to set a tone of approachable, and there's even some nonverbal things to do. Go into your employee's office. Don't make them, okay, come into the boss's office. There's just some nonverbal things that help people feel a little bit safer, make bosses come across as more approachable than, but tone and nonverbals and just the verbals that we choose. And I hope that answers your question. Okay.
I have a quick question. How do you create the need, I guess on our campus, how would you go about it if we were to improve the interpersonal communication here on campus? I know it's idealistic.
It is idealistic. I was thinking with Dean Fair, when I agreed to do this talk, Dean Fair was not in the position that he is now, which is over this department in diversity. But, I was thinking, we had a conversation about, is it just bringing someone in to talk about this is what it's like to be from East Asia, and these are the cultural things that I've experienced? Is it just that? Is it just a sharing situation? I almost think it's more of a conversation. Like this dialogue would be great to have with people, because I think we get scared to say, well, what does your religion believe? Well, why do they believe that? To be able to have some conversations to where we are all learners. And so I think some dialogue sometimes is better than just lecture. Let me just tell you how bad my story was, and it was really bad, and I've been oppressed and whatever. I mean, that's all important stuff, but at this point, we've got to figure out a way to get past that and have a dialogue with each other. Dialogue to me, again, and I get on my soapbox about communication, but to me, it's all about being able to interact with people. And again, it's a two-way street. It's not just listening and it's not just talking. It's a flow of communication. It's how we learn and grow.
One more question? Anybody? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.